Welcome to Mormon Land, a podcast all about the news and culture of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I'm Senior Managing Editor Dave Noyce. I oversee the Salt Lake Tribune's faith coverage. I'm joined by Senior Religion Reporter Peggy Fletcher-Stack. Hi, Peggy.
Hi, Dave.
Before we start, here's a quick ask. We invite you to go to patreon.com, where you can access all of the Tribune's faith coverage, podcast transcripts, and the full Mormon Land newsletter. Again, that's Patreon, patreon.com/Mormonland. And if you haven't already, please follow us on Instagram at mormon.land. Now for today's episode. While the racist priesthood temple ban is indeed in the past, racism itself remains very much in the present for society and for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. In fact, the Utah-based Faith recently published a new webpage addressing the topic, reminding members that President Russell Nelson directed them to lead out in abandoning attitudes and actions of prejudice. And his top counselor, Dallin Oaks, urged Latter-day Saints to, quote, help root out the sin of racism. The article went so far as to encourage members to speak up when racism arises in their congregations. So how can Latter-day Saints play their part? And do they need to start by looking honestly in the mirror and asking, do I hold racist views? Mauli Bonner, a well-known Black Latter-day Saint and an award-winning filmmaker and songwriter, penned an opinion piece recently for the Salt Lake Tribune to help members examine themselves and answer their leader's call. He joins us today in studio. Mauli, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So glad to have you. Okay, first question. What did you think when the church's recent article came out?
Gosh, I thought all the things. It was a gambit of emotions and thoughts. My biggest feeling was there's somebody on the inside who's pushing, and I appreciated that because I'm sure that whoever worked on putting that out, there were some in that group that wanted more. Didn't get more, but they got some, you know? And then there was others on the other spectrum. So I had a softness in my heart for those who were a part of pushing that forward. Also, I was shocked that they took a stance on some things. And then I was hopeful that other stances would be taken, you know? So it was a range of emotions.
You talk about having some trepidation when they approach this topic.
Yes.
Explain that a little bit.
Well, there always is, you know, because for Black Latter-day Saints, you know, when it comes up, we don't know if we're going to get hit with harmful words coming from people within our congregation or mixed families, you know, or leadership. We don't know. And then we're always hopeful that it's going to be the healing that we're hoping to have. And so there was all those feelings, stomach churning as you're reading through it and combing through the words that were written.
So what prompted you to write the op-ed with its 10 steps to help people examine their lives on this issue?
So in the topics and with questions that they had, at one point there was a section that talked about how those experiencing racism can respond to it, which I thought was interesting, but it didn't speak to racism, people who are behaving in racist ways. And I thought that that's really the point of this, is to say we need to root it out. But there weren't those guidelines of how do we go about that? What are the steps we take? And so I thought, you know what? I want to help those, because I know I meet with and I serve with people who are trying to root out their own racism, but they're like, I don't even know where to begin. What does that even mean? And so I wanted to kind of make it easier.
Let me ask you, it kind of leads to this. Do you believe there's more racism in the church than just outside in society as a whole, and do you see it lessening or getting worse?
Okay, that's a tough question.
It is.
It's a tough question because I think for African Americans in the church, we probably experience more in the church, and a lot of it has to do with proximity. You know, we have more engagement with people who are different than us, but at the same time, there's a history of racism that hasn't been fully dealt with, taught, changed, and now teachers know how to go about handling this history, and congregation members know how to talk about it. So because there hasn't been a change of what we once believed and what we do now, and what happened. Now here's where we are. There hasn't been that journey. We find ourselves being hit with racism intentionally and unintentionally more often than outside of our circles of faith.
Does it have to do also with the fact that it's, African Americans in this country certainly are a minority, even more of a minority in the LDS Church?
Yeah. I mean, so it's more than just the minority part. I think it's because we have a shared history together. African Americans and European Americans, like with the restoration of the church, we were there side by side together, doing it together, you know? And just like when we think of our country and the country being built, we were here together, you know, in the worst way. But we were together, African Americans and European Americans coming to America. But in our faith, we know that there's a history of church members that are white, church members that are black working in tandem together equally. And that has since changed. I mean, it changed, you know, coming out of the early church. And when the priesthood was taken away and we have now generations who experience that, there's a culture that we're struggling to undo.
Mm-hmm. So it's the band that, you know, it wasn't there at the first, then it was there for more than a century, and then gone. It's still not really completely dealt with.
Right. And I think because we don't deal with the history clearly, like a lot of people just don't know. Like some people might be listening right now and say, wait, so black people could hold the priesthood? Like we're still learning that, like, yes, black folks had the priesthood right along with white folks, and then it was taken away 1852-ish, right? Mm-hmm. And I think because we don't know that history, there are people who have to try to fill in the blank, like teachers and, you know, seminary teachers. For example, when I was in seminary, my seminary teacher had me stand up and he said, now you won't meet Jesus and it's not your fault. It's not your fault, but because of the color of your skin, and would go on. Right.
What?
Right.
Wow.
But, and so I don't think that this is some, racist man who wanted to really stick it to this young black boy. I think he was filling in the blanks of what was,
he was trying to explain.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. And because we have not untaught the history, people are filling in the blanks. And because of that, racist behavior is happening towards African Americans.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
Yeah. I mean, even though the church has disavowed many of those teachings that were even more prominent, it's still not really dealt with in your mind.
No, because we have to teach it. You know, like I love that it's disavowed, and we are, and with this piece that we're talking about, we're actively saying this is the direction we're going, folks. We're saying root out racism. We're engaging with black communities, but without reteaching the history and acknowledging what was. We don't know who we were, you know.
Okay, a little more hopeful question.
Yeah.
The church is redoing the hymn book, and the new hymn book includes more diverse music, such as African American spirituals. You're a musician. Hey, what do you think about that? Are you happy to hear white folks singing these spirituals? And second of all, how do you think could this help?
It is helpful. And like steps are being taken, you know, in so many different areas. And music is a big one, especially for African Americans. Music is, you know, that is a big part of our testimony and connection to Jesus Christ. So to see the efforts made to include spirituals and music that we can connect to means a lot. Now, that being said, as a musician, you know, of course, I'm like, you should have put me in the room so I could help you with this arrangement.
So you know how to sing it, is what you're saying, right?
Exactly, right.
Yeah.
Right. But that's step 2. I will take step 1. This step 1 is a big...
You can't get to step 2 without step 1,
exactly.
I guess, right?
It's a giant step 1, and I love it.
Yeah. The church's piece acknowledges that much of its approved art for meeting houses depicts Jesus as a white Northern European man. Yet it explains he was born in Bethlehem to a Jewish woman. Would art depicting a darker Jesus, which would probably be more accurate, help in any way erase racism in the faith?
Oh, drastically. I know that okay, so I have a young son and he is active. And when he was around 8 years old, we had to always take walks around the foyer, you know, because he was that child who's going to disrupt the whole thing, or we got to get him out, right? And as we're walking around and he's pointing at art on the walls, and he's pointing at a painting, one of the paintings that I love, and it's Jesus Christ. You may know this one with all the angels with the horns, you know, and the trumpets. And he says, Papa's not in heaven. And I said, what are you saying? Why are you saying that? Well, look. And he points to the picture, and it's all white angels and white Jesus.
And there's a lot of angels in that picture.
Yeah. It's countless, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sitting here having to find a way to explain to my son, don't look at the picture. Don't believe what you see. And that shouldn't be the message that we're teaching our kids. Like, yeah, the picture's on the wall, but that's not it. And so it becomes very confusing and difficult to teach children truths if it's not depicted truthfully, right? And so what I do love is the acknowledgement in the piece saying, no, we do not believe he's a European white male. And so that's step one, right? And so I look forward to step 2 and 3 where the art changes. So it coincides with what we're
that
teaching.
art's out there.
Yeah.
It's not like it's not available. And from Latter-day Saint artists.
Right.
Yeah, members are choosing to paint it that way. More and more members.
Yeah.
But there's some lag time.
Yeah, there is, and we're patient so long as we're moving, and so we just got to keep moving forward in the right direction,
Okay, to your opinion piece, your op-ed piece, you start your list by urging people to examine their assumptions. What did you mean by that?
Well, I think that I know, at least in the church for sure, my family was a lot of people's only engagement with an African-American family. Otherwise, they're just going off what they see in the news or what show they watched, and it's not real life. And so because of that, so we have these biases that we bring to the table based on things that are fed to us through the media, rather than our actual lived experience with that person. And so we have to pause and say, wait a second, why do I have these thoughts? Why do I have these belief systems? Why do I have these reservations? Why does this feel off to me? And a lot of it has to do with proximity and just knowing that, I don't have enough experiences to really have the opinion that I have. And we have to just start there so that we can rebuild the biases that we have.
It seems like it would take a lot of reflection to, first of all, recognize you have, those assumptions.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think, and it's a hard one to admit to ourselves as well, because we don't want to feel like we're judging people or being biased or even behaving in a racist way. Like, no to all those, please, not me is how we feel. But we have to say, where is it in me? Where? Like to where you said in your intro, which was beautifully written. We have to look at ourselves individually.
So you think people say, I hear this all the time, well, I'm just colorblind.
Right.
I don't see color. Like, well, what's wrong with you?
Right, right.
How do you not see color?
Right.
And not in a bad way.
Yeah.
In other words, that's not, they think that that's a positive thing to say, but in fact, it's like making people invisible.
Right. Mm-hmm. I was having this conversation with a friend the other day, and even as well-intentioned as it is to say that I'm colorblind, and the intention is to say that I don't care that you're this color, that color, it doesn't matter to me, but I want it to matter. I want you to see my color, my culture. I want you to know where I come from. Mm-hmm. I want you to know how I hear music and why I love it. I want you to know why you shouldn't touch my wife's hair when she walks in the room. But if you just don't see it, then you don't know. So see my color, see my culture, and learn about it.
Mm-hmm. You offer another really intriguing suggestion, telling people to be kind to themselves and not take on, quote, unnecessary and unwarranted shame or guilt. Why do some people do this, and why is it important that they avoid doing that?
Okay. I like to see myself as like a white person connoisseur. I've just been around so many different white people, right? So like in work and church. And so what I've realized is that white people do not want to cause harm. They just don't. They don't want to be the source of it. And it's so much so they don't want to be the one causing the pain that it's either not me, or they take on everything. Me, I'm terrible. I must. And it's like, no, you're still incredible. It was just this one thing I was talking about. Just this one thing you said or one thing you did. So let's address this one piece of this one conversation rather than it encompassing the whole person. And I have to be conscious of that as a Black person, as I'm dealing with a lot of my white friends, is that I don't want to tear down the beauty of who they are. And I know how sensitive they are to not wanting to cause pain. And so it's a little bit of an adjustment, I think, for people to have to say, okay, let me look at me and know that doesn't mean I'm a bad person, but this is the thing that is bad that I don't want to do.
Do you think if they just don't want to feel that way, so then they avoid it? Is that one of the dangers of that?
It's all or nothing. It's one way or the other. Yeah. It's either they're saying, not me, not here. So some people are listening to this and there's something happening inside of them, right? There's some discomfort. They don't know what it is. They don't know, should I turn this off or should I lean into it? And hopefully there's a balance of listening and searching and not saying, oh, I knew it. I'm racist. I'm bad. Oh, and not saying, not me. Don't know what he's talking about. Not here.
Do you think some of it's a sense of kind of collective guilt? Like maybe I individually didn't do this, but I'm guilty because white people have been the dominant group and white people have been racist. Do you think there's some tapping into that kind of collective? There
is. I do think that there's, and I think one of the points I mentioned was generational trauma. Like, we're all affected by racism, all of us. It's hit all of us in the worst way, in different ways. And a lot of time we do take on our past. Black people taking on things that didn't happen to us, but it feels so now, Mm-hmm. And we're making things that are small very big because it feels so big. And then same thing with white folks. So there's some white people that are taking on things that are bigger than they need to take on, because there's a history there. And we just have to acknowledge that there is history between our races and that it's going to be a difficult journey. But some things are not ours to carry. They're ours to recognize and learn from, but not our burden to bear.
Okay, so speaking of history, why is it important, do you think, to educate church members about their history on this issue and learn that actually there were some people who pushed back on it against the priesthood temple ban? Even back then, they did.
Yeah.
Those people didn't win the day.
Right. They lost that day.
Orson Pratt.
Yeah, Orson
Pratt, others of the era, and even down through the decades,
right.
Lowell Benyon, et cetera. There are people pushing.
So, the way I see it is there's got to be a level of activism for the Lord. Like we have to stand up for him, and we have people throughout history who have done that in all churches, in all faiths. But in our church, we've had that, we have Jane Manning James, who had an experience of being offered to be sealed to Joseph Smith and Emma Smith and their family, not knowing what that was, but then later realizing it, wanting to do it. But then the racism that was now a policy precluded her from being able to do that. And so she still persisted. She still pushed back against that. Same thing with Elijah Abel. When he was no longer able to go and unite his family together, he pushed back. He wanted to have those meetings, get interviewed to do the work. Orson Pratt, that you just mentioned, he was debating against the governor and the prophet, Brigham Young. And it doesn't mean that we're fighting to fight. We're standing up for the Lord and what's good and what's right, and in a loving way.
So why do you think the other side is equally important to educate about all the people who didn't stand up and what happened over the century?
I think it's important, in my opinion, to see where you line up in history, because today is going to be history that people talk about, just like then is. And we all hope that we were with Orson Pratt when Orson Pratt was saying, we can't do this. This is enough to make the angels blush, as we've heard in his speech, and him saying, we cannot, this is our fathers. That's what they did. We don't have to do this in this new land. And now we look back and we pray that we're on that side, right? And so today, there is going to be a side of history. Where were you? Where did you stand during all this? Because it will be recorded. And wherever you stand, feel good about it because people will remember you for it.
Talk about some of the things you've done to try to educate people. You had a really good film about Green Flake or the Black pioneer.
I did.
Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So when I was learning more and more about early Black members of the church, and especially slavery in early Utah, I was overcome with emotions that I didn't even know how to deal with. And so in the intro, you mentioned that I make films and music. My background is in music. So writing music is something I've always done and expressing myself that way. But what was new to me was making film. But I learned these stories and I thought, people need to see it. They need to hear the words come out of a mouth instead of choosing to read it or not read it. And so I began telling the stories that way through art with Green Flake and didn't know how the film was going to be received because Green Flake was an early member of the church who drove the first wagon into the valley as an enslaved 19-year-old. How is the church membership going to receive that? I didn't know, but I know that they needed to know about it. And thankfully, it's been received really well. And now we have a monument at This Is the Place Heritage Park to remember him and his brothers-in-law, Hark and Oscar, and Jane Manning James. And so I hope to continue to tell more stories.
Mormon Land will be right back.
Okay, so Mauli, you acknowledge that sometimes people unintentionally say, and we've talked a little bit about this, say or do something racially insensitive. What is your advice to them?
Well, there's two different advices I'll give. So one is if you hear it, if you hear something that is said by someone that's that seems off, wrong, racist, you have to say something. You have to say something. And that something may not be the best something, but try. Take that first step, right? That first step is saying something. And then later you'll be like, oh, I should have said, I should have done, but you have to speak up. What that does is, one, it puts a pause and hopefully even a stop to the racism that might be happening. But it also allows the person who is having to feel that racism, so say it is an African-American person, they're having to deal with what was just said. It's telling them that, oh, they're not all that way. Because if you're an for example, in my ward, I don't know about you guys, so I'm in the bishopric in my ward. I won't call my ward out all the way because I'm going to talk about them. But so my job is I have a large group of people who we clean the building at a certain date, and they're in our group text. And then another counselor does, and then Elders Quorum president does, right? And so as I sent out my group text, somebody sent responses back with the worst things you can say to Black people, just berating me, right?
What?
Didn't know who it was. There was, but somebody was just doing that, right? And then guess what happened next? Silence. Nothing.
Even though it was a group text.
It was a group text. Dozens of people. Silence. And so I'm left to think, oh my gosh, is this my ward? Is this who they all are? And so you have to speak up. You have to say something so that we're not left believing that that's the body, because it's not, but we don't know it if you don't say something.
I'm still in shock.
I know.
I'm just speechless.
Yeah, things happen,
But thank you for giving specific examples, because
Yes.
I think that that's truly the only way we'll recognize our own insensitivities and our own unwillingness to speak up. Speaking of that, race can be a difficult topic to address, but why is it so? In other words, I think what you've said, people simply don't want to talk about it. They don't want to see themselves as racist. They don't want to have to defend their behavior. They don't want to have a confrontation, which they believe any discussion will be, but it doesn't have to be, right?
No, it doesn't have to be. And I think what makes it extra difficult is that we come from a culture of having like the fullness, right? And the truth. And when we look into the past of our previous apostles or prophets and we're like, whoa, there were some really bad things that were done here. How do we then grapple with that and say, but I thought we were it, And it's like, no, yeah, we are. With flaws. We're people that are in it. It is the gospel, not the people. It is the gospel. And if we can just identify the fact that, they're flawed. And you know what? I think some of them are racist. As racist as one can be. If we can be okay with knowing that, then we can start to sift through what was right and wrong. Otherwise, if we're not able to call things out as they are, as clearly as they come, now we're manipulating reality to try to be okay with the world that we want to try to believe is, and when really it isn't. I'll just say this one other piece. I think the fear is, if we say that about our prophets before us, then what does that mean about our prophets today? What does that mean about our apostles today? And that's scary, right? Because I don't want to think that they could do or say something or they could be terribly hurtful, but they're human. Just like the apostles before them. And they let us know that they said we're not perfect. So when we sustain them, we're praying that the best of them can come out in the most important times. And they will not be perfect, but we pray they can be the best they can be. That's what we can do.
You know, it was interesting that the church's release, this publication, addressed what we're talking about, not to stay silent on racism. And the article even urges members to courageously and kindly address it when it happens at church. So let me ask you, what would you recommend a member do, for instance, if a teacher or class member says something racist during a Sunday school discussion?
First thing is put your hand up. That's the first thing.
Not sit on your hands.
Not sit on
like
your hands.
the text
Yep.
message people apparently did.
Yep.
Right.
So before you have the words, put your hand up. You felt it. It was wrong. Put your hand up. And as the Spirit leads you, it's going to be time to speak. Now it's time to speak. And it might just come up as, I really didn't like that. That just felt wrong and really insensitive to this particular group or topic. Say whatever comes to your heart, whatever comes to your mind, what you may want to try to avoid. Now, here's the counsel. Even though what they said was probably this racist comment, it's what they said that you want to try to address rather than trying to help them identify that it was racist. So instead of that was racist, it's that was wrong. And this is why. That was hurtful. That was insensitive. This is why I felt this is not okay. I hope we can all recognize that in this room. You know, just address the behavior rather than the title of what it is.
Is that what you would say, courageous and kind?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean that it's not racist. It just means take that first step and allow the doors to be open, because some people hear those things and right away, like I said, it's all or nothing for some. So those who are at nothing, racist, nope, not me. And
Yeah.
you don't even get to hear anything.
They're going to be defensive no matter what. But if you identify, I mean, it's really just like a marriage, you know.
Yeah.
You know, like, don't say you're a jerk. Say what you just said was really hurtful.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
You know,
right,
like,
exactly.
you really hurt my feelings.
And I think the important thing is it's not just
Identify.
that person
Yeah.
and the teacher or whoever made the comment. There's others in the class
Exactly.
that need to hear that,
Yeah.
probably.
Absolutely. Same thing to that staying silent thing. I can't imagine. I've been there where I've been in the room. I mean, I just gave you one example. I won't give more, but to where someone says something and you just look to see, are they in agreement? And it's hard to believe that they aren't if they don't say something. Yeah.
But I do think I'm guessing that a person who speaks up in a kind and courageous way would probably win the hearts of some other people in the room. In other words, you would kind of be rewarded, you would think, for that.
Absolutely. They'll have people who could come up to them and say,
I mean,
thank you.
not everybody will agree or whatever, but if you do it in a kind way, I'm guessing you could change the dynamic in the room.
100%.
You know, one person speaking up could, the same way as one person in a room can turn a dynamic in a room bad. One person speaking well. Anyway.
That's right.
Okay, so final question. What else would or could the church do to help the church now as a body, not individual members, do to address this?
Wow. Well, this big step was this Q&A, this topics and questions. Is that what it was titled?
Yeah,
I believe.
topics and questions.
And because what's going to happen is they're going to mess up. When the church tries to do something like this, there's going to be some home runs and some slip ups. And I'm just so grateful that they are willing to take a misstep, take a step, you know, and then they're probably going to hear back from some people, I can't believe this, and I was hoping for that, and which a lot of that is right. But I hope that doesn't say recoil, and we never should have said anything. I hope that says, okay, step 2 is going to be even better. Watch this. So my hope is, I'm not even going to say what they should do. I just hope they take more steps, continue to take steps, build on what they've built on with this, because each step is going to be imperfect except that. But as they take steps, we're going to get better and better. And the more we involve the people that we're actually speaking to, involve the people that we're speaking about. So for example, a lot of this was based on those of African descent, involving them in the literature to know before it comes out what people are going to feel. That makes a huge difference.
But what you're saying is more steps are needed.
Oh, absolutely. This is,
The journey's not over.
Oh no, we've just begun. Some people may have read this and be like, got it. That's what I needed. Like, no. That's step one. Like we've just begun. So this is just the beginning of taking steps and eradicating racism, because what we can't do is cut that weed off right when it comes out the dirt, because it's just going to keep growing. We got to get to the root of it. So we can't just say the thing and say, this is how we feel now. We have to get to the root of where did it come from? What damage did it do? Where is it going? How can we get it out? That's what we've been asked to do. And I plan on doing it.
Mauli Bonner, thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank
Great
you.
discussion. And thanks to Peggy Fletcher-Stack.
Always a pleasure.
And to our producer, Chris Samuels. We remind you that you can keep up on all of the happenings in and about the church by subscribing to the Salt Lake Tribune's free Mormon Land newsletter. Just go to sltrib.com to sign up, and we'll talk again next time on Mormon Land.